What happens after the courtroom doors close? When the cameras disappear? When the headlines stop? And when a convicted murderer begins serving decades behind prison walls? What really becomes of his life? Can prison expose parts of a person that a trial never could? Or does the real story only begin after the sentence is handed down? Today we're taking you inside the latest developments surrounding Karmelo Anthony and what life has reportedly been like since entering the Texas prison system. While the public focused on the verdict, a different story has been unfolding behind razor wire, one filled with unanswered questions, unexpected developments, and details that rarely make national headlines. Most people think they already know this case because they followed the trial. They don't. The truth is, what has happened since Karmelo Anthony entered prison may completely reshape how you view everything that came before. By the end of this video, you'll understand why so many people are still searching for answers, and why the most important pieces of this story have remained hidden in plain sight. Stay with me, because the updates you're about to hear aren't the ones dominating social media. They're the missing pieces that finally connect what happened in court to what's happening inside a Texas prison today. A mother stands in a Texas courtroom. She turns to face the teenager who killed her son. Her voice doesn't shake. She says, "You may have been given a sentence of 35 years. You should feel lucky. I have been sentenced to a lifetime without my son." Right now, as you're watching this, that teenager, Karmelo Anthony, is inside a Texas state prison. His family raised over $630,000 for his defense. But the appeal documents, filed less than 24 hours after his murder conviction, describe him as too poor to afford a lawyer. The money is gone. The family is gone. They reportedly left the state of Texas entirely. And inside the prison, where the 19-year-old is now serving his sentence, reports are circulating about threats that have corrections officers on alert. Though, as of right now, no major news outlet has confirmed the specific details. This is the story of a stabbing that took seconds, a trial that divided a nation, and a case where every answer only creates more questions. Two families walked into a courtroom in June of 2026. Only one of them could speak freely. The other had been silenced by a gag order for over a year while their son's name was torn apart online, while strangers debated his character, while the attacks got so vicious that police were called to their home 6 times. Not for protection, for swatting. False emergency calls designed to terrorize a family already living through the unimaginable. By the time you finish this documentary, you'll have the full picture. Not the version that went viral on social media. Not the narrative shaped by protests or political agendas. The verified, documented account of what happened from that April morning in 2025, all the way to where things stand today. If you're serious about following true crime cases with credible, sourced, and responsibly reported information, subscribe to Crime Dive Network right now and turn on notifications. This case is still developing, and you need to be here for every update. Let's go back to the beginning. April 2nd, 2025. A Wednesday morning. Megan Metcalfe packed her 17-year-old son, Austin, a snack before school. She hugged him before he walked out the door. It was an ordinary morning. She had no idea it would be the last time she'd see her son alive. Austin Metcalfe was a high school junior, a football linebacker, 6 feet tall, around 200 pounds. He had a twin brother named Hunter. The two of them had grown up side by side, hitting every milestone together. Austin was known as a leader, the kind of kid coaches trusted, the kind of teammate people looked up to. That Wednesday, there was a track meet. Students gathered, coaches set up. Under one of the memorial tents, Austin and his teammates waited between events. It was a normal afternoon, until it wasn't. Karmelo Anthony was 18 years old. He was not a student at the school hosting the meet, but he was there that day. According to the defense, he had a friend on the team. That friend's name was Eddie. The defense would later claim that Eddie waved Karmelo over, invited him under the memorial tent, that this wasn't trespassing, that Karmelo had every right to be there. What happened next is where the stories split. According to witness testimony that would later be presented in court, a confrontation occurred between Austin Metcalfe and Karmelo Anthony. Words were exchanged. Austin shoved Karmelo. That shove is not disputed. What is disputed is what happened in the seconds before it, and what was justified in the seconds after. Karmelo Anthony had a knife in his bag. Not a pocket knife, a tactical folding blade. The kind that can be opened with one hand. The kind carried by law enforcement officers on active duty for serious field tasks. He pulled it out, and in one motion, he drove it into Austin Metcalfe's chest. The emergency calls started almost immediately. The first came from a student. The voice on that recording was young, shaking, trying to hold a conversation together while describing something no teenager should ever have to put into words. The student told the dispatcher that a friend had been hurt. The coaches had the person responsible. When the dispatcher asked where the victim had been injured, the student said the chest. What stands out in that call isn't just the panic, it's the fragmented sentences. A teenager trying to communicate under a level of pressure that most adults will never experience. The second call came from a coach, an Army veteran. His voice was different, measured, trained. He told the dispatcher he was applying pressure to the wound. He answered every question with clarity. He gave Austin's approximate age. He stayed on the line. At one point during that call, the people surrounding Austin thought they saw him breathing again. They held on to that, kept working. The coach stayed on with the dispatcher. Compressions continued, but that same Army veteran coach would later take the witness stand at trial. He would tell the jury what he knew in those moments, while he was on the ground beside Austin Metcalfe. He said that despite what the people around him were hoping for, he knew. He knew from the moment he assessed the situation that Austin was not going to make it. He kept working anyway, because that's what training does. You keep going even when the outcome is no longer in question. Austin Metcalfe died that afternoon. After it was over, the coach sent one final message to Austin's phone. Austin would never read it. The message said, "Love you, man. Sorry I didn't say enough." Within hours, the case exploded. Not just locally, nationally. Social media lit up with debates about self-defense, about race, about who had the right to be where. Protests formed. A gag order was issued by the court, restricting anyone connected to the case from making public statements. That order would remain in place for over a year. During that time, the Metcalfe family couldn't respond, couldn't defend their son's name, couldn't speak out while strangers dissected Austin's character online, while conspiracy theories spread, while their grief was turned into a public spectacle. And during that same time, someone started swatting them. Jeff Metcalfe, Austin's father, would later reveal in court that his home was targeted 6 times. His wife was swatted twice. Police showed up with weapons drawn because of false reports, adding layers of trauma to a family already shattered. While the Mets were being terrorized in silence, Karmelo Anthony's family was raising money. Over $630,000 poured in, reportedly through online fundraising. The case had become polarizing enough that thousands of people donated to his defense. The family hired attorneys, prepared for trial. And then, after the verdict, something strange happened. The appeal documents filed by Anthony's defense described him as indigent, too poor to afford legal representation. Where did the money go? That question still doesn't have a public answer. The trial of Karmelo Anthony began on June 1st, 2026, more than a year after Austin Metcalfe's death. It was held at the Collin County Courthouse in McKinney, Texas. Judge John Roach Jr. presided. No cameras were allowed inside. No live stream. The public had to rely entirely on reporters present in the courtroom to describe what was happening. But the case was already under scrutiny before a single witness took the stand. Nearly 600 people were summoned for jury selection. The process itself became a flashpoint. The prosecution used peremptory strikes to remove 3 black female jurors from the pool. The defense immediately raised a formal Batson challenge, arguing that the strikes were racially motivated. The prosecution responded that the removals were based on race-neutral reasons, specifically that the 3 women were educators of school-aged children. Judge Roach sided with the prosecution. The challenge was denied. The jury that was ultimately seated included no black members. It was composed of white, Hispanic and Asian jurors, 11 women and 7 men, including alternates. That jury composition would become one of the central arguments in the appeal, filed less than 24 hours after the verdict was read. The prosecution called 21 witnesses over the course of the trial. Students who were under that tent, coaches who responded to the scene, investigators who handled the evidence, medical professionals who examined the facts of the case. But one witness became the moment nobody saw coming. His name was Eddie. He was a teammate of Austin Metcalfe, and according to the defense strategy, he was the key to their entire case. The defense had built their argument around the idea that Karmelo Anthony had been invited under the memorial tent, that a friend had waved him over, that his presence wasn't trespassing. It was accepted. Eddie was that friend. When the prosecution called Eddie to the stand, the defense likely expected him to support their narrative. But that's not what happened. Eddie testified that while he did know Karmelo Anthony, they were not close. He minimized the relationship. He did not back up the invitation story the way the defense needed him to. Then, the defense responded with photographs. Photos of Eddie and Karmelo together, at Eddie's home, at Eddie's grandmother's birthday party, playing video games side by side. The kind of pictures people take when they're genuinely comfortable around each other, when they're friends. The photos told a completely different story than the testimony Eddie had just given under oath. And now the jury had to decide what to believe. Was Eddie lying on the stand? Was he pressured? Was he trying to distance himself from blame? Or was the friendship real but overstated by the defense? That credibility question sat directly in front of the jury for the rest of the trial. The knife itself was presented in court as a replica. The original remained in law enforcement custody. But the demonstration was chilling. A prosecutor and a law enforcement officer stood just feet away from the jury box. They showed the jurors how the blade functioned, how it could be opened using only one hand, how quickly it could be accessed from inside a bag. The officer confirmed on the stand that this was the type of knife carried by officers on active duty, not for everyday tasks, for serious field operations, the kind of tool designed to penetrate and cut efficiently. Karmelo Anthony was 18 years old. He wasn't law enforcement. He wasn't military. He was a high school student going to a track meet, and this knife was in his bag. The defense built their case around self-defense. They argued that the size difference between Austin and Karmelo was significant. Austin was a football linebacker, 6 feet tall, 200 pounds. Karmelo was smaller. The defense claimed that when Austin shoved him, Karmelo was in genuine fear for his safety, that the response, while tragic, was justified. The prosecution's closing argument came down to one line. The prosecutor looked at the jury and said, "You don't get to meet a shove with a stab, especially if you provoked the shove." Karmelo Anthony did not take the stand. He did not testify in his own defense. The jury never heard his version of events directly from him. They never heard him explain why he brought the knife, what was said before the shove, or what he was thinking at that moment. The only time the jury heard about Karmelo's regret was during the sentencing phase. The only witness called by the defense at that point was his mother, Kayla Hayes. She took the stand and asked the jury for mercy. She told them her son was her oldest child, her firstborn. When asked whether Karmelo regretted what he had done, she answered, "Yes, he is very sorry for what he did. Throughout the entire trial, Karmelo Anthony sat at the defense table with his head down. He did not look at Austin's family. He did not raise his eyes when witnesses described Austin's final moments, when the coach testified about trying to save his life, when Austin's loved ones sat just feet away, grieving in public. The jury began deliberating on June 9th, 2026. They returned a verdict in under 3 hours. Guilty of murder. When the word guilty was read aloud, Karmelo Anthony broke down. He was shaking. He was taken into custody immediately, led directly out of that courtroom in handcuffs. But the trial wasn't over. Texas law allows juries to consider one additional question during sentencing in murder cases: whether the act was committed under what the law calls sudden passion. A finding of sudden passion would have capped Karmelo's sentence at 20 years. The jury rejected it. They did not believe this was a heat-of-the-moment act. They sentenced Karmelo Anthony to 35 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. He will not be eligible for parole until he has served at least half of that sentence. He was 19 years old when those words were read. Then Judge John Roach gave the Metcalfe family the floor. 4 people stood up. What they said in that courtroom is the part of this case that no headline fully captured. Austin's aunt, Marley Needham, spoke first. She said April 2nd, 2025, was a day she would never forget. She described the moment she received the call from her sister. She said she never truly believed Austin could be gone. She spoke about a void inside their family that no verdict would ever fill. She said the family had leaned on their faith, though it had not eased the weight of the loss. Before she sat down, she looked toward Karmelo Anthony and asked the one question that haunts this entire case. She said, "One question will always remain. Why? It may never be answered." Austin's father, Jeff Metcalfe, came next. He described his son as a boy, a twin, a leader, and a true warrior. He recalled the day Austin was born, the moment his son first grabbed his finger. He spoke about watching both his boys grow up side by side, every milestone a father holds on to. He told the court the family had created a scholarship in Austin's name so that people would know what it meant to be a leader. Then his tone changed. Jeff Metcalfe told the court that since his son's death, he had been swatted 6 times at his home. His wife had been targeted twice. For months, a gag order had prevented him from responding publicly to those who attacked his son's character online. He said that time was over. He slammed his fist on the podium. He said, "People think grief is sadness. It is not. It is rage, pure, unfiltered rage." He told Karmelo Anthony to stop looking at the floor and face him. Then he addressed the racial narrative that had surrounded the case from the beginning. He said, "I said from day one, this was never about race. It's about right and wrong. We are all humans. We all bleed the same color." He looked directly at Karmelo and said, "You failed your parents. You failed yourself. And you failed society." Then Hunter Metcalfe stood up. Austin's twin brother had not been inside that courtroom once during the entire trial. Not for jury selection. Not for opening statements. Not for a single day of testimony. Sentencing day was the first time he walked through those doors. He asked Karmelo Anthony to look at him. He told the court that the past year of his life had been spent trying to learn how to forgive, that he had leaned on his faith every single day, that he was still working on it. Then he said, "You took a son, a brother, a friend, my best friend from this world. You took someone who was supposed to be an uncle to my kids." He told Anthony that his name would eventually be forgotten, but his brother's memory would live on. Hunter returned to his seat and was met with embraces from friends who were there supporting him. The last person to speak was Megan Metcalfe, Austin's mother. She did not raise her voice. She spoke about walking into an empty room every morning, an empty bed, the daily reality of remembering over and over again that Austin is gone. She said her conversations with him are now one-sided, that she speaks to him at his grave. Then she said something the entire courtroom needed to hear clearly. She said, "My son was murdered. He didn't just die." She recalled the morning of April 2nd. She had packed him a snack before he left. She had hugged him. She had no reason to believe that morning was anything other than ordinary. She had no idea it was the last time, she said. "Now I only have videos and memories of his laugh." Then she turned to face Karmelo Anthony directly. She said, "You may have been given a sentence of 35 years. You should feel lucky. I have been sentenced to a lifetime without my son." The courtroom fell silent. Karmelo Anthony was led out. The trial was over. The verdict was final. For most cases, that would be the end of the story. But this case didn't end there. Within hours, the gag order was lifted. Jeff Metcalfe posted a video online, echoing much of what he had said in court. The family could finally speak, and within 24 hours, Karmelo Anthony's defense team filed an appeal. The central argument? The jury selection process. The removal of those 3 black female jurors. The Batson challenge that was denied. They argue the trial was fundamentally flawed from the start. The same appeal documents that challenged the conviction also describe Karmelo Anthony as indigent, unable to afford legal representation. This, despite over $630,000 reportedly raised by his family for his defense. No public accounting of that money has been released. And then there's the question of what happened to Karmelo's family. Multiple reports indicate they left the state of Texas entirely after the trial. Where they went and why remains unclear. Karmelo Anthony is currently serving his sentence in a Texas state prison. Unconfirmed reports have circulated about threats inside the facility, enough to have corrections officers on alert. But as of now, no major outlet has verified the specific nature or credibility of those reports. Meanwhile, the Metcalfe family continues to live with a loss that no sentence can repair. They've established a scholarship in Austin's name. They speak at events. They keep his memory alive in ways that matter. But every morning, Megan Metcalfe still wakes up to an empty room. Jeff Metcalfe still carries the rage he described in court. Hunter Metcalfe is still learning how to forgive. And the question Marley Needham asked in that courtroom, the question that may never be answered, still hangs over everything. Why? Why did an 18-year-old bring a tactical knife to a track meet? Why did a confrontation over words escalate to a fatal stabbing? Why did a teenager who claimed to be afraid choose a blade instead of walking away? The jury heard the evidence. They deliberated for less than 3 hours. They returned a verdict of guilty. They rejected the claim of sudden passion. They sentenced Karmelo Anthony to 35 years. But the questions don't end with a verdict. The contradictions don't disappear with a sentence. And for 2 families, the consequences of what happened on April 2nd, 2025, will last far longer than any prison term. Over $630,000 was raised for Karmelo Anthony's defense. The day after his murder conviction, the fundraiser was shut down. The platform confirmed the money had been dispersed over the previous year for legal costs and family relocation. Then, 24 hours after the guilty verdict, Anthony filed his appeal. In those documents, written by Anthony himself, he told the Texas court he's too poor to employ legal counsel. His family has reportedly left the state of Texas. His father's social media profile lists New Orleans, Louisiana, as the current location. No public accounting of the funds has been provided. No statement from the family has addressed where any of it went. $630,000. And the teenager at the center of it all is now in a state prison, telling a court he cannot afford a lawyer. That question is sitting open right now, and it is not going away. The verdict didn't end this case. It fractured it. What happened in the days and weeks following Karmelo Anthony's conviction showed a justice system strained, a family in exile, reports of danger inside a Texas prison that remain unconfirmed but documented, and a set of contradictions so glaring they demand answers. The morning after sentencing, the gag order that had been in place for over a year was lifted. Jeff Metcalfe, Austin's father, could finally speak publicly without restriction. He posted a video online. Much of it echoed what he had said in court: his grief, his son's legacy, his frustration with those who had politicized Austin's death. But the video did not end there. At a certain point, Metcalfe's tone shifted toward those he viewed as having mocked or exploited the situation. And in that portion of the video, he used a phrase to describe Karmelo Anthony that was immediately and widely condemned. The phrase drew on a racial stereotype historically used to demean black Americans. The backlash was fast, and it came from across the political spectrum. Critics pointed out directly that the remark contradicted the statement Jeff Metcalfe had made in court just 3 days earlier. In that courtroom, standing before a judge and facing his son's killer, he had said, "This was never about race. We are all humans. We all bleed the same color." 3 days later, he said something that undermined those words entirely. This documentary is not here to defend or condemn Jeff Metcalfe. What happened to his son is documented. His grief is real. And what he said in that video is also documented. A person can stand in a courtroom and speak with genuine weight, and then say something 3 days later that contradicts it. Reporting on this case accurately means reporting all of it. His words in court carried real meaning. What he said in that video did not. Both exist on the record. But away from the Metcalfe family, the conduct surrounding this case in the weeks following the verdict painted a deeply troubling picture. A woman in Longview, Texas, a complete stranger with no connection to this case, was surrounded and physically attacked by a group of women while walking to her car after leaving a local bar. According to her account, her attackers were referencing this case during the incident. She required staples in her head. She had nothing to do with any of it. She was not connected to the trial, the families, the lawyers, or the legal proceedings in any form. On social media, a trend appeared that used Austin Metcalfe's name and likeness in a mocking context. This channel will not name it, describe it, or show it. If you encounter it, report it. That is the only appropriate response. Jurors who delivered the verdict began living with real fear following the conclusion of the trial. Reports confirmed that strangers were being approached, harassed, and in some cases falsely identified as having served on the jury. People with no connection to the case whatsoever were being targeted simply because someone online made an assumption about their identity. This is what surrounded the case outside the courtroom. Not a conversation about justice, not an honest reckoning with the facts. A series of actions directed at people who had nothing to do with the outcome. If you're following this case because you want the truth, not the rumors, not the outrage, not the misinformation, then subscribe to Crime Dive Network right now. Turn on notifications. This case is still moving, and we're covering every development with the same sourcing and accuracy standards we've held from the beginning. Now, let's talk about money. The Give, Send, Go fundraiser created for Karmelo Anthony and his family was launched on April 15, 2025. That was less than 2 weeks after Austin Metcalfe's death. By the time the guilty verdict was read on June 9, 2026, the fundraiser had raised between $630,000 and $634,000. The fundraiser was shut down the following day. Give, Send, Go released an official statement confirming the closure. The platform stated the fundraiser had been created to support pre-trial needs, and that the funds had been dispersed over the course of the prior year for legal defense costs and family relocation expenses. The family of Karmelo Anthony has reportedly left Frisco, Texas. The social media profile associated with his father, Drew Anthony, lists New Orleans, Louisiana as a current location. Now here is the detail that demands your full attention. Following his conviction, Karmelo Anthony filed a notice of appeal. Those documents, reviewed and reported by both WFAA and Fox News, contain a declaration written by Anthony himself. In those documents, he describes himself as a person who is too poor to employ legal counsel on appeal. His family raised over $630,000 in his name. Give, send, go. Confirmed. The funds were dispersed. The family has reportedly relocated out of state. And the person at the center of all of it is now telling a Texas court he cannot afford a lawyer. Where did $630,000 go? No public accounting has been provided. No statement from the family has addressed it. That question is sitting open as of this recording, and it is not going away. The morning after sentencing, Karmelo Anthony spent one night in the Collin County Jail. That was all the time that passed before he entered the Texas state prison system. On June 10th, 2026, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice moved him to the Wallace Pack Unit, a medium-security correctional facility located near Navasota, Texas, roughly 70 miles northwest of Houston. A new intake photograph was taken upon his arrival. The image that circulated was markedly different from what the public had seen before. Head-shaved. Standard prison-issue clothing. No bail conditions. No ankle monitor. No scheduled court appearances. 35 years. The Wallace Pack Unit is not a low-level facility. It houses approximately 1,400 inmates and has faced federal legal scrutiny in the past. Civil rights attorneys filed suit in 2014, alleging that temperatures inside regularly reached levels that posed serious health concerns for inmates. The facility also faced prior challenges related to its water supply. A spokesperson for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice confirmed to Newsweek that Anthony will remain at this facility. In the days following his transfer, reports began circulating on social media, claiming that officers inside the Wallace Pack Unit were on alert following alleged threats against Anthony from a prison group. The same posts claimed that prison officials were weighing the possibility of placing Anthony in a separate protective housing arrangement. These claims have not been confirmed by NBC News, CBS News, ABC News, Fox News, Newsweek, The Washington Times, or any other major verified news organization. The sole source for this information, as of the time this documentary was recorded, is social media. This channel will not present unconfirmed reports as established fact. But what is a fact is this. The Wallace Pack Unit houses 1,400 men. Karmelo Anthony arrived there as the most publicly discussed convicted person in the country at that moment. A teenager whose case had been debated across every platform, every newsroom, and every dinner table for more than a year. The environment he walked into on June 10th, 2026, was not a neutral one, regardless of whether any specific threat has been confirmed. There is also a separate matter that predates his transfer entirely. Before the verdict was delivered, a well-known internet figure named Charleston White had made himself a prominent voice in this case. He initially spoke out against Anthony, following the stabbing. Then, without explanation, he reversed course entirely. He began publicly supporting Anthony, praising the family, and advocating for his innocence. He claimed on camera that he had personally arranged boxing training for Anthony to prepare him for prison life. Then the support ended, and it ended with an admission. In a video posted online, Charleston White stated that he had been paid by the Anthony family to support Karmelo. He said he was returning the money. He said Anthony's father was not the kind of man he could stand behind. And in a separate message, allegedly directed at Drew Anthony, Karmelo's father, White stated that if the family continued engaging with him, he had the connections to make Karmelo's time inside very uncomfortable. Charleston White has a documented background that includes prior time in a correctional facility and an acknowledged history with gang involvement. He is based in Texas. Whether his statements translate into any real-world action inside a state prison is something no one can confirm. But the statement was made publicly. It is on record, and it sits alongside the unverified social media reports as a second, separate layer of concern surrounding Anthony's current situation. Two separate threat narratives. Two separate sources, neither confirmed by a major news organization, to the level that would allow this channel to report them as fact. But both are documented, both circulating, and both worth monitoring as this case moves forward. On the legal front, the timeline moved quickly. Less than 24 hours after the verdict on June 9, 2026, Anthony's legal team filed a formal notice of appeal. The filing was confirmed by Collin County court records and reported by CBS News and ABC News, among others. A notice of appeal is not a new trial. It does not pause the sentence. It does not return Anthony to freedom. It is the opening step in a process that, under Texas law, can take years to complete. It formally signals to the appellate court that the defense intends to challenge both the conviction and the sentence. Appellate attorney David Cole, speaking publicly after the filing, said Anthony's team could have several meaningful arguments on appeal. The most significant centers on jury selection. The prosecution removed 3 black female jurors using peremptory strikes during the selection process. The defense raised a Batson challenge, a formal legal objection based on a United States Supreme Court ruling that prohibits the removal of potential jurors solely because of their race. The prosecution argued the women were removed for race-neutral reasons, citing their status as educators. Judge Roach sided with the prosecution and allowed the strikes. The seated jury had no black members. In a case that had become one of the most racially discussed criminal trials in recent Texas history, that fact drew immediate scrutiny from civil rights organizations, legal commentators, and members of the public on all sides. The Collin County chapter of the NAACP stated after the verdict that they were outraged, and that the outcome raised serious concerns about fairness and representation in the justice system. The Collin County Young Democrats also issued a formal statement of criticism. On the other side, Collin County District Attorney Greg Willis stated that justice had been served and credited the jury for delivering accountability. Republican representatives from the Frisco area called the verdict a necessary outcome. Willis stated publicly that the verdict sent a clear message about the community's expectations. Anthony's parents, in an interview with TMZ following sentencing, stated they did not believe their son had received a fair trial. His mother, Kayla Hayes, was asked directly whether Karmelo had been treated fairly in court. Through tears, she answered, "Absolutely not." The appellate court will now review the complete trial record. Jury selection procedures. Evidence presented. Legal instructions given to jurors. Any procedural questions raised by the defense. That process takes time. Months, possibly years. In the meantime, Karmelo Anthony remains at the Wallace PAC unit. He is 19 years old. He will not be eligible for parole consideration until he has served at least 17 and a half years from the date of his conviction. He will be in his mid-30s before that process can even begin. This case is not finished. The appeal is in motion. The questions surrounding the fundraiser have not been answered. The reports from inside the prison remain unresolved, and a family missing one of its own is carrying the weight of consequences that no legal proceeding will ever fully address. Austin Metcalfe's mother said she has been sentenced to a lifetime. His twin brother said he is spending that time learning how to forgive. His father built a scholarship so that Austin's name would stand for something beyond what happened on April 2nd, 2025. His aunt asked the one question that still has no answer. Why? That family walked into that courtroom and faced something most people will spend their entire lives never having to face. They did it in public, on the record, with a level of honesty that this case did not make easy. The verdict is in. The sentence has been delivered. But the story is not over. Where is the money? Will the appeal succeed? Are the prison threats real? What happened to the Anthony family after they left Texas? And what will justice look like for a mother who wakes up every morning to an empty room? A father carrying rage that no courtroom statement can release? And a twin brother trying to forgive the person who took his best friend? Those questions remain open, and Crime Dive Network will be here when the answers come. If this documentary gave you the complete, verified, sourced account of this case, from that rainy morning in Frisco to where things stand right now, then do one thing before you leave. Subscribe. Hit the bell. Share this with someone who has been following this case and deserves to hear it reported accurately. When the appeal moves forward, when the prison situation becomes clearer, when the question of that $630,000 moves closer to an answer, this channel will be here. Sourced, verified, accurate. Austin Metcalfe deserves that. His family deserves that. And so do you.